my body, my choice, or, on the other side, save a life, save the babies, when in reality both sides don't often have a strong or an understanding of what the reality of abortion really is, both morally and actually what happens in the clinic. So through her work, and then there were none and everything, Lara's worked with these women and heard their stories and some insane things that is not part of the nice little political messaging for this issue. So she's going to talk to you about all this, and please feel free to ask questions at the end. But it's worth hearing. So thank you.
And I bought free stuff, so when I was in, you can come and get free stuff, stickers and pens, and some things that have some of the websites I'll be mentioning on there. So that's all up here for you. Please take it. I don't want to take it back home. I can always get more. So that was a really nice introduction by my husband. He failed to mention I'm also Molly's sister.
That's better than being your wife. I'm just saying.
We'll talk after. So I want to break my own rule, and I'm going to read something off my phone to you, because I think it's important to read this in the words that it was originally said. In and then there were none. We've been around for just over 10 years. And like Chris said, we were started by Abby Johnson. She used to work for Planned Parenthood. If you saw the movie Unplanned, who saw the movie Unplanned? Okay, that's my boss. And she started this ministry for abortion clinic workers because there wasn't anything for people like her when she left Planned Parenthood. And in that time, in those 10 years, we've helped 550 abortion clinic workers with their jobs, find new work, find healing. And they've kind of become part of what we refer to as our family or as our tribe, and then there were none. We've also helped 7 full-time abortion doctors leave their jobs performing abortions. And since then, those doctors have had major conversions and become very actively pro-life. So the ministry has been very successful. And one of the things we started doing 2 years ago was we decided we wanted to honor our quitters. That's what we call the mostly women who leave their jobs in the abortion industry. They're our quitters. So every month for the last 2 years, we have honored one of them, and we call them the Quitter of the Month. And we share some of their story. We ask them to do a bit of an interview and share with us their experience of working in the clinic, what made them quit, why they quit, and how they're doing now. And so this woman named Sarita was our Quitter of the Month a couple months ago. And she's local. She worked in a clinic in Washington, D.C. And she's been with us for several years. And I want to read you her story in her own words, because Sarita's experience is actually very typical of the experiences of most of the women who come to us. I say women because of the 550 workers who've come through, and then there were none, 7 of them have been men. The majority of employees in the abortion industry are women. Most of the doctors are men, but it is the women who run the clinics, it's the women who work in the clinics, and those are our clients. The men who have come to us have mostly actually been security guards who were doing security out front and couldn't handle knowing what they were guarding on the inside, and so they came to us. So let me read to you Sarita's Quitter of the Month story, and then we're going to talk about what she says. Am I reading this correctly? The judge said, as he reviewed the charges against me. Miss Munoz is being accused of stealing a sonogram machine. Okay, I'm going to pause there. How many of you have seen a sonogram or an ultrasound machine? Okay. They're big, right? I mean, they're big and heavy and expensive and clunky. Okay. Sarita says, I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. I hadn't yet heard the charges against me, ones that had me turning myself into police, getting a mugshot, and being put in a jail cell. Suddenly, I was on the verge of losing my freedom. I shook my head slowly while standing before the judge, recalling the moment I agreed to work in the family planning wing of a Washington, D.C. women's clinic. It was one of the worst decisions of my life. I should have seen it coming. Just 11 months earlier, I walked into the clinic for my first day on the job, feeling good about my qualifications and the contribution I would make. I found I was hired along with 3 other new employees, kids really, who would basically be doing what I would. There was a 19-year-old girl straight out of high school, another who had just left a T-Mobile store, and another girl whose previous job was working at a shoe store. I was a certified medical assistant, ready to give quality care. Did I get stuck in the wrong group? Before we could even tour the facility, we signed enough non-disclosure agreements to render our fingers useless. We were then trained on how to avoid the people praying out front, the protesters. Talk to no one. Do not wear medical garb, only street clothes. Wear hoodies and hair over our faces as we walked inside. Don't talk to the press. Don't expect IDs with pictures on them, you're not getting them. Of course, the pro-life advocates were out full nearly every day, all the way from the public transit station to the clinic's front door. It didn't take long for them to figure out where I worked. In fact, one saw me entering the clinic, ran up, placed a card in my hand and said, "Quit this job, we'll help you." And she ran away. I hurried in, I kept her card. We were patted down before entering the clinic to protect against cameras, recording devices, and wires. Those of us who would be working the Maryland branch from time to time were taught that when an underage girl came in with enough money to pay, but without a parent, we were to say, "Gee, it's too bad you didn't go to the Washington, D.C. branch where they can take you at your age. Unfortunately, we can't take you here." Wink, wink. All the secrecy and dishonesty were alarming, but I figured there must have been a good reason so many precautions had to be taken. And so, at the request of the clinic, I taught my young fellow coworkers to do basic medical tasks. Remember, they worked at a shoe store, T-Mobile, and right out of high school. So I taught them how to take blood pressure. I taught them how to draw blood. What would the clinic have done if I didn't know how? Initially, I was assigned to counsel the ladies that came in, thinking that I could recommend waiting to those who didn't feel ready to go through with an abortion. That was until my supervisor stopped me cold in my tracks. "Stop that, Sarita. Just send them on through," she said. The counseling, I was able to figure out, was just to show them that we cared, but we didn't. When they made me go to the POC room, I'm going to stop there. POC, in terms of abortion, when our clients talk about POC, it stands for Products of Conception. What is a product of conception? The baby. In a POC room, and every abortion clinic has one, it is the job of the person in the room to go through everything that is collected from the surgical abortion procedures and to find all of the parts of a baby and to put that baby back together like a puzzle to make sure that there was nothing left behind in the uterus of the woman who had the procedure. Almost all of our clients, when they come to us, most of them have had to work in that room because nobody wants to. And it is that room that is generally responsible for the astronomically high amounts of PTSD that we see in our clients. These 7 times the national average suicidal ideation that we see in our clients. Almost all of our clients come to us addicted to some sort of substance as a coping mechanism for what they did in the clinic. And it's usually that room that starts it. So Sarita says, when they made me go to the POC room to take the aborted fetus parts and reassemble them so they could be accounted for, we called it putting the puzzle pieces together. I began to have nightmares and spent my days dealing with the depression that comes with feeling like I was bad inside. Some babies that had been destroyed had fingernails, eyelashes. They were the loveless, discarded, tiny parts of a human that I had to gather and make into a baby again, something that should be reserved for God. But I must have hidden my horror well. They told me I would soon be trained to do sonograms. The current sonographer had gotten on their bad side by asking too many questions, like, are you sure I'm supposed to be doing this? If something goes wrong, won't I be held liable? Doesn't the baby on the screen look much larger on the tray than it did in the sonogram? Isn't that going to be a problem? So as they had her train me, I found out that she had only had 2 weeks of training. It was the exact amount of training that she was able to give me before my supervisor stuck a bogus fake certificate in my hand and told me I was ready to now start seeing patients. How is that possible? A sonogram certification at the university required 2 years of instruction and a state test. I had 2 weeks. Then it dawned on me. They didn't care about the safety of the baby because the baby was going to die anyway. They even told me to manipulate the sonogram of a 24-week-old fetus to look 18 weeks with some creative digital shading. They wanted me to commit fraud. I looked at the smiling and preening senior-level managers and felt ill. They projected such an air of caring, but they were running a criminal organization, one shrouded in lies. They were getting rich while forcing their peasant-class employees to work in blood and step way over the moral line. It made me sick, literally. I developed a dry cough that wouldn't go away, and as the days passed, it turned into a debilitating hack that sometimes had me unable to walk across the room without having to hold on to something. I was losing it one day, nearly doubled over, red-faced and coughing up a lung, when my supervisor tapped her foot and said coldly, "When is this going to be over, Sarita? We've got ladies to see." That was when it became clear the focus of the clinic had come off the rails. They weren't there to care for anybody. They just wanted what they wanted and had lost their humanity along the way. A commoner like me holding up production was expendable. I walked out to never go back. When I got home, I looked for the card the protester had stuck in my hand, and immediately, and then there were none, came alongside to talk to me like a good person who happened to be caught up doing a bad thing. And they offered me prayer. I was going to need it. While in the hospital with pneumonia for over a month, I got a call from a friend saying that the police had been looking for me with a warrant for my arrest. Police? Not wanting a raid on my house, I turned myself in, thinking it had to be a mistake. They took me into custody, stood me in front of a height board to take my picture, then locked me in a cell for the night. The ridiculous charge of theft against me for stealing a sonogram machine, which are huge, was dropped. But the damage had been done. Anyone who performs my background check will see a mugshot, a report of my arrest, and the restraining order the clinic took out against me. All it cost me was my good reputation, my viability for future employment, and $1,500 for a lawyer to file a couple of papers. Their crime bosses at the clinic had taken down their man. For the next 4 years, I couldn't find a job. Many employers expressed interest, but just until they found out what was on my record. Those were the desperate and depressing times. But the team at And Then There Were None were there with me every step, caring for my cares, ushering me into healing and forgiveness found in Jesus, offering me financial support to get me over the hump and protect myself against the clinic, and sit with me and pray, pray, pray. Today, 4 years later, I'm employed and love my job. God has taken my bad decision, redeemed it, and given me back my joy. And he used a lovely band of sisters who never wanted anything from me to do it. It sounds over the top, doesn't it? I mean, there's this young woman, she thinks she's gonna be helping women, so she starts working at the abortion clinic, finds out her coworkers are not even close to being medically qualified to do anything medical, and yet here they are doing medical things. They're told things like don't talk to people, don't wear wires, wear your hair over your face so people can't see you going inside. It sounds like a really badly written crime novel. Except that's the reality. Over and over again, we have women coming to us from the abortion clinics, and they tell us the same things over and over again. And at some point, when 550 different people have told you the same things over and over again, you realize it's not just a one-off, or maybe this one clinic, or maybe just this one time, but it's an industry, and it's systemic, and this is the reality of abortion and how abortion works. And you know, we have this thing, we call it abortion science and abortion reality. And Sarita's story is good at sort of exposing both of those a little bit. You see, if you open up an embryology textbook, if you go to Pure Science and look up when does a human life begin, it will tell you at conception a new, unique, unrepeatable, genetically human being is created. That's science. Abortion science says a human being doesn't exist unless you want that human being. It's not technically really a baby, even though it is. Even though every single person who's been in that POC room tells you that's absolutely a baby. You see, abortion reality says you don't really need a medical degree to work here. You don't actually need training. We're medical, but not really. We take all the government money we can get, but we don't want government strings attached to it. And in fact, if we feel like it, we're going to commit fraud against that same government because it lets us keep our money. That's abortion reality. Do you know here in Virginia, we have several abortion clinics. Most of them are in Northern Virginia, around Richmond. There are some near the Outer Banks. Here in Winchester, our closest facility is actually Hagerstown, Maryland. But did you know, in Virginia, this tattoo was more heavily regulated than abortion? When I went into the tattoo parlor, they showed me, Molly's laughing because she was with me when I got this tattoo. So were my kids. That's a different story. So when we went in, right, they showed me the needles that they would use and that they were autoclaved and prepackaged and clean. We saw them sanitize the area that we'd be in. We saw him the tattoo artist, watched him sanitize his hands and then put on gloves. That doesn't necessarily happen in abortion clinics. One of the things I have up here are these pink cards for a website called Check My Clinic. Check My Clinic has compiled inspection reports. Well, I don't need it anymore. They've compiled inspection reports from across the country of abortion facilities and put all the reports for you to see. Here's the tricky part. Most medical, well, all medical facilities have to be inspected, and they are regulated, usually by some very strict guidelines for our safety, right? It's for our own good. Because, you know, you don't want a doctor who isn't actually a doctor performing surgery on your foot. You don't want a phlebotomist who's actually not a phlebotomist drawing blood. You don't want someone who has never sat through a class or learned about medications dispensing narcotics. That makes sense, right? Well, that's reality. It's not abortion reality. Because right here, even in our lovely Commonwealth of Virginia, you have abortion clinics where untrained staff are dispensing narcotics and medication. You have, you know what, instead, no, I'm gonna do it again. I'm gonna read you one. So this is right here in Nova. This clinic, this inspection report from this clinic. On the one day that an inspector showed up, because the way it works in the clinic is a lot of times the inspector will give a heads up like, hey, I think I might be coming to do a surprise inspection at your clinic later. And then, according to our quitters, the clinic staff goes, oh, and tries to clean things up, reminds everybody to be on their best behavior, and then they tell the employees who they really, really know cannot be there and shouldn't be working to go home. Then the inspector shows up. So imagine this place here in Nova, everyone's already on their best behavior. They've already tried to make it look pretty decent inside. And this is still what the inspector found. There was no administrator on site. Every medical facility is supposed to have a medical administrator. It's like the boss, the person who's in charge. There was no one. A non-licensed staff member was preparing injectables and assisting with abortions. Right, let's say that one again. Non-licensed, unqualified person. Not only preparing the anesthesia and injectables, the medication, but was also assisting in the abortion procedure. Right, that sounds safe. The facility failed to implement a complaint process and designate staff for the complaint resolution. There was no verification of credentials or certification for 5 of the 7 employees who were supposed to be licensed. Oh. Sarita's story, right? I worked in a shoe store and now all of a sudden I'm administering anesthesia. The facility failed to comply with state regulation regarding handling and distribution of controlled substances. In other words, they're handing out opioids and narcotics without following any of the guidelines that are set forth by it, or even knowing maybe who they're giving them to. All 7 employee records had no TB screening or Hep B screening. No signed contract from the physician performing the abortions. So there was no agreement between the doctor who was doing the abortion procedure, and not only that, but there was no documentation of the doctor's education, training, or licensure. So they had this guy coming in there to perform surgery on women, and they had no proof that he was even a doctor. The physician, we think he was a physician, there's no proof he was even a physician, did not remain on the premises until all of the patients were stable. Now that's a bad idea, right? What if one of those patients suffers a complication, then there's no doctor there? Oh, and by the way, they also didn't have a procedure in place if there was an emergency there to get the person having the emergency to the emergency room. Because if you work in an abortion clinic, you're actually not allowed to call 911. It's policy for Planned Parenthood, it's policy for Whole Woman's Health, and it's policy for the Trust Women Federation, the 3 largest abortion providers in America, to never call 911. Because if you call 911, the call is public record. And so we have stories of our workers who have put women who are quite literally bleeding to death in the back seat of their car and have driven them to the hospital to avoid calling 911. This is abortion reality. How does that sound safe? It's funny because here in Virginia, where my tattoo is more regulated than abortion is regulated, they like to tell us that abortion is a medical thing, right? Oh, it's a medical procedure. It's all about women's health. Don't you love that, ladies? Right? Like all of women's health is somehow tied up with your ability to go and subject yourself to doctors not having licenses, people injecting you with things that aren't qualified to inject you with things. Like, really? That's what women's health is? Women's health is abortion. Oh, but wait a minute. It's actually not even medical. That doesn't even make sense. In 7 states in the United States, abortion is not considered medical at all. It's considered something completely and totally different, so it doesn't even have to be regulated. So if you go on Check My Clinic and you want to look up abortion clinics in a different state, in New York, in Washington State, in Nevada, in Maine, you're not going to find any inspection reports. Because when we asked the state governments for the reports, they said, oh, no, I'm sorry, our abortion clinics don't need to be licensed or regulated, so we don't inspect them at all. They can literally do whatever they want, and no one would know. Except we have quitters who've come to us from those places and they tell us what they do there. Like in Louisiana, before Louisiana started regulating, there's a clinic there, it's called the Delta Clinic. And we have a quitter who came to us from there several years ago. Delta was one of the clinics where they performed late-term abortions. And she was a low-level medical assistant. So she's not like a nurse, she's not a doctor, she's not an anesthesiologist, and yet she got to a point working in that clinic where she was the one performing the abortions. That's not even legal. And you know, she told us something very interesting. She said, as an industry, big abortion, right? You've heard of like the big pharma, you've heard of all the terms they like to use for that, right? Big abortion, the industry, loves to say that it cares about women. I mean, that's what we hear from Planned Parenthood whenever they get all upset about something. They're always upset about something. That's what we hear, the talking points. We care about women. We care about women's health. We really care about you. We care about you so much that in this particular clinic, the Delta Clinic, the employees who worked there hated it, hated their jobs, hated themselves for the jobs that they were doing so much that they actually didn't give anesthesia to the women who were having the abortions. Abortion is a painful procedure. It's forcing the body to do something unnatural, and it's a surgical procedure, it's major surgery. Instead of giving women anesthesia for pain, they injected them a saline solution because they were so angry at the women because they were so angry at themselves. How twisted is that? When this quitter told us this, she told us this during one of our healing retreats. We have healing retreats several times a year for those who have just left the industry, and then we have another one for those who've been out for a little longer and have already been to one retreat. These weekends are really intense times of some hard work for our quitters, but they're an opportunity to really enter into the process of healing, because all of them need healing when they come to us. And it was during one of those healing retreats that this client of ours said, well, yeah, we all hated working there so much, we started getting mad at the women coming in for abortions. Because I didn't want to be mad at myself. I didn't want to admit that what I was doing was wrong because I had to work so hard to convince myself it was okay. So instead, we got mad at the women who were coming in for the abortions. And we got so mad at them, we stopped giving them anesthesia. And our staff, you know, we like to say we've heard it all, but every so often we hear something we haven't heard yet, and we all kind of went, what? And she said it like it was just normal. And so one of our staff members goes, I'm sorry, you stopped giving them anesthesia? Yeah, we wanted them to feel pain. And we're like, what? Abortion as an industry hates women. Abortion as a personal experience for those who have worked in that industry makes them hate themselves. And because of that, they start to hate women too. Abortion isn't about women's empowerment. It's not about women's rights. It's certainly not about women's health. You know, one of the most beautiful things that we see with the people who come to us is a pattern that we've noticed over and over again. And the pattern starts with someone just like Sarita, who wants a job, who thinks that they're going to be doing something good, who thinks that they're going to be doing something for women, and who starts their job even feeling excited. And maybe they have a little bit of doubt, or they're feeling a little not so great about the fact that it's a Planned Parenthood, or it's an abortion clinic, or it's a whole woman's health. But they tell themselves, you know what, I'm just going to be doing the paperwork. I'm not really helping with the abortion. Or I'm just going to be doing the counseling, not really having anything to do with the abortion part. I'm helping the women before they really get to that point. That's what they tell themselves. Except that's not how clinics work. Clinics work like an abusive relationship. After they start front desk, counseling the women, holding their hands in the waiting room, there comes a point where the administration says, okay, you know what? You're so great at your job. Who doesn't like to hear that, right? I like to hear it. You're doing such a great job. I really think you would be really good if we could maybe bring you into the procedure room just to help the woman feel more comfortable before we start. Well, I never really wanted to be in that room, but if they really think I'm good at my job and they really need me, okay, sure. So now, our client who thought they'd just be doing paperwork or just be doing counseling is in the procedure room. But she's still not there for the abortion until the one day, oh, guess what? So-and-so didn't show up today. Do you mind just staying through this procedure? You just have to hold her hand. Or just hold the equipment over here. Or just stand over here by the tray. Or just be there to help me clean her up afterwards. And the next thing you know, now they're in the procedure room full time. And then after that, you end up in the POC room. And then after that, you end up assisting in the procedure itself. And then in the case of our client from Delta, you end up doing the procedure. Over and over again, that's the pattern that we see. And then, by the time they come to us, they're having nightmares, they're having flashbacks, they're drinking alcohol all day long at work. We have several clients who came to us from clinics, different clinics all over the country, who used to take breaks in their break room and snort cocaine. And then they'd go right back out and continue doing abortion procedures. Because it was the only way they could get themselves through. Many of our clients would go right from the abortion clinic to the bar where they stayed for hours until they couldn't remember what they had done that day. They'd somehow get themselves home, they'd show up to work hungover the next day and do abortions and do the whole thing all over again. So by the time they come to us, that's their reality. That's abortion reality. And they hate themselves, and they cannot live with themselves. And so the first thing we do is we say, you know what? Can you let us love you? And as they learn how to let us love them, they eventually learn how to let God love them. Most of them don't want anything to do with Him when they come to us, because they don't feel like they're worthy of being loved by Him. And so as we love them, they learn how to accept that. They learn how to accept God's love and His forgiveness. And then, only then, are they able to start loving themselves. One of the things we have our clients do at their very first healing retreat is come up with their number. You see, if you want to heal, you have to know what you're healing from. If you don't identify what you're healing from, well, guess what? You're never going to heal. And so part of what we do at this very first retreat is peel back all of those lies that they have told themselves to keep doing the job that they were doing and get to the heart of the reality of abortion. And to do that, they come up with the number of abortions that they have been responsible for in some way. Guys, I've sat in the room with women as they've done the math over and over and over again, and have had them say to me, Laura, this can't be right. What's your number? My number's 35. picture now is a giant football stadium full of these little tiny faces staring at me. I don't know how I heal from that. But you know what? That same woman with that number, today she works in a pregnancy resource center, counseling women who are contemplating abortions. And she has a new number. The number of babies that she has helped save. That's healing. That's what we do. That's what happens when you learn how to let someone love you, so you can learn how to let God love you, so you learn to relearn how to love yourself. Only God can do that. That's mercy. And that's the story we hear over and over again. Oh my gosh, this number. How do I heal from that? And they do. So I've told you some horrible things about abortion, but if there's one thing I can tell you about abortion reality, it's that it's possible to heal from it. And that's probably the most amazing thing about my job, is to see the healing, and to see the hope, and to see the joy that returns to over 550 quitters. So I'd encourage you, check out And Then There Were None. Check My Clinic. The information's insane. But it's important to know. And it's important to be able to have resources to direct people to. You never know who you're going to come across. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say to someone, maybe they're contemplating abortion, maybe they're contemplating working in an abortion clinic. Hey, you should know before you go. That's the tagline for Check the Clinic. Know what you're actually contemplating doing, and see the reality of this industry that doesn't care about women. I'd like to be able to give time for questions. So why don't we all just take a minute, take some deep breaths, because I threw a lot of information at you and not all of it was pleasant. And then if you have some questions or you'd like me to clarify anything, or there's something you'd like to know more about, I'd like to give us some time for that. I'm gonna get a drink. It's okay, shake it out. Breathe. You know, part of my job at the And Then There Were None is I'm trained in trauma. So I'm a compassion fatigue therapist, compassion fatigue educator, and I've been doing traumatology training. Sometimes when I give these presentations, I actually will go through some of the things that we do with like our disaster trauma patients, just because the overload of information and some of those mental images that I know I gave you, it can be super unsettling. So I won't do that now, but I will encourage you to shift around in your chair a little bit, take a deep breath and blow it out, and then ask me your questions. Yeah.
If people hate working in the industry so much, why do they stay? It's like there's enough jobs around that they could feasibly quit and find something else to do.
That's a really good question. So I would say, based on what our quitters have told us, there are two main reasons. The first is that the vast majority of clients who come to us are low level. They're not corporate. Corporate level abortion industry, we've had several. They're very removed from the procedure room, and they get paid exorbitant amounts of money. So for a corporate level abortion industry, it's about money. Because you're not going to find that level of income for the really low amount of work that you're doing. For the lower level employees, a lot of it does also come down to being financial. Most of our clients are single mothers. They are living paycheck to paycheck. They do not have higher level education. And so they are disproportionately paid well for not having the qualifications they actually should have to do the job that they have. And so that keeps them there because, like many of them tell us, well, I'm trying to put my kids through school, I have bills to pay, I can't afford to quit to find another job. And they work so many hours, they don't have time to job hunt in between. And the abortion clinics do that on purpose. And I know that sounds almost conspiracy theorist of me, except the higher level quitters who've come to us have told us that. Like, well, no, we want them to work longer than normal business hours so they can't find other jobs. And tell us, yeah, well, of course we pay them more than they're actually qualified for because we don't want them to quit. Because if they lose an employee, if they lose one employee, it slows down their production, which is super twisted, but that's what they call it. Abortion clinics know exactly how many abortions they have to perform on any given day to meet their bottom line. Planned Parenthood has quotas. If you don't meet that quota, you get in really big trouble from corporate. Whole Women's Health has even more strict quotas, and they get really nasty with their employees if you don't meet them. To the point where they've fired some people. We've had people come to us because they got fired because they weren't counseling women efficiently enough to choose abortion. So it's really twisted on the inside, but it acts like a trap. And the second reason, the non-financial reason, actually has to do with what I said earlier, that it's almost like an abusive relationship where you end up manipulated. Because you start working, you're complimented, you feel important, you're doing really cool things like wearing scrubs, even though you never went to any medical training whatsoever. And you've got your stethoscope and you're drawing blood, and that makes you feel really good about yourself. And one of the things that Abby has said over and over again is, if you're applying for a job in an abortion clinic and you're not doing it because you have this altruistic idea that you're helping women, chances are you're already wounded in some way, and the clinic itself will exploit that wound to make you feel good about yourself. But then once you feel good about yourself and you start compromising your values, your own beliefs, then you start to feel stuck. Because then you either have to quit, and all those other reasons I just gave you for quitting, right? I have bills to pay, I have kids I have to feed, I can't find another job. All of that comes into play. So you start lying to yourself, convincing yourself that you can work here. And human beings are amazing. We can convince ourselves of anything if we try hard enough. And we see that with our clients. And so then it just becomes this black hole that you just get sucked into more and more until you have an organization like Another Women that shows up and says, whoa, we will help with the financial side. We will hook you up with our resume writer and our job coach. We will help pay your bills if you can't. We will provide healing. Just quit. So that's what we do. We try to remove those reasons for staying so they have a reason to quit and can feel supported while they do it. Question? All right, we'll go this. Go ahead.
Okay, I was wondering, I guess, because you said like there's at least 7 states that don't classify them as like medical facilities, and most of them are not. Like, so what are they like technically classified as? If not,
Each state has a different classification for it. Yeah, basically. And it's mostly, in that case, it's mostly for their paperwork. I think in one of the states, they consider them elective ambulatory care facilities. But because that state doesn't have regulations for elective ambulatory care facilities, it doesn't fall under any regulation.
like a whole new category.
Yes.
So they could call it like a hardware store, and the hardware stores, things are like super low, they're like, oh, we'll go with that one.
What does that
I
mean?
mean, meaning like, it's like a walk-in, walk-out clinic, kind of outpatient. Yeah, I mean, what's crazy to me is, like take New York. New York doesn't inspect abortion clinics, doesn't regulate abortion clinics. But if you are under 18 years old, you cannot go to a tanning salon. You cannot go and get a fake tan in New York State if you are under 18. But if you're under 18 in New York State, you can walk into an abortion clinic, have an abortion with no adult present. They will not report statutory rape. They will not report human trafficking, just like Sarita said, remember how she said, oh yeah, wink, wink, go to DC. If you're underage, they'll take care of you there. Can't tan, but you can get an abortion. It's crazy.
How many Planned Parenthoods clinics and also just other, I can't remember the names you said, but how many of those have been like either closed because of suing or just all of that, I guess?
So, and then there were none has helped shut down 21 clinics. Several of them have been permanently shut down. The difficulty is, we have several open cases right now with different clinics. Some are Planned Parenthood, some are Whole Women's, some are Trust Women. And our clients work with lawyers. We have lawyers who will do pro bono work for them if they want to try to bring a case against their clinic. But just like they had Sarita arrested and charged with stealing a sonogram machine, that's what they do to people who try to expose what's happening. And so it becomes really tricky. One of my clients, actually, she and I met with the FBI and the, who were the three we met with? It was FBI, Health and Human Services, Investigative Division, and a liaison from alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and the DEA. And that felt like a really weird crime novel too. So we all sat down to talk about her particular experiences. She actually worked in research. She didn't even work in an abortion clinic, but because her research facility wanted her to come up with what they called an Amazon.com for baby body parts to sell to other universities to do research on. Yeah, that's a thing, that happens, that's the abortion industry. She realized that a lot of what they were doing was illegal, that they had gotten a government grant. So if you're a taxpayer, your taxpayer dollars went to fund a project that created Amazon.com to sell the body parts of little babies to universities so they could use them for profit. And she found out that they were coercing women into having abortions because they needed specific ages of babies, and they needed specific characteristics. So they were targeting women, targeting babies to be bought and sold. They call it procuring and dispersing. So to bring down abortion clinics, to close them, is difficult. They're very protected, they're very wealthy, they have really good lawyers. And so what we have decided is that if we drain them of their employees, well, if you don't have anyone to perform the abortions, then you can't do them, can you? So that's what we try to do. And then we work with our clients if they do have a legal case to sue the clinic. And then other government investigations that may be ongoing.
So in Virginia, our governor just recently legalized the performance of abortion by a non-doctor. Is that starting to become more common practice with abortion clinics?
Yes. Yeah, that makes you feel super safe, right? So now it's actually legal to go and have an abortion by someone who's not a doctor at all. And not only that, they're trying, up until this year, 2020 is going to 2020, there are 3 kinds of abortions: chemical or medical, surgical, and late term. Now, in some states like New York, and what our governor is trying to do here in Virginia, there is a 4th type of abortion, and they call them after birth abortions. Yeah, let that sink in. An after birth abortion. And that's the that's the reality. So now you can go, and it doesn't even have to be a doctor who performs an abortion. Oh, and now we're going to have after birth abortions legalized. The push right now is actually to make the legal age of when someone magically becomes a person 3 months old.
Yeah, what's the contents of these non-disclosure agreements? Like, do they protect the companies from being sued by employees for seeing illegal stuff?
Mhm. It basically, it's like a gag order. By signing it, the employee agrees to not disclose anything that they see, hear, read, do, see other people do, experience inside the clinic.
So you can bring the force of the law down on somebody that reports something illegal? Is this because they're wrapped up in high levels of government, or just because they have enough money that they can hire the right people to take stuff for them?
The reason they do the NDAs is it's to protect, ultimately it's to protect corporate level. They don't care about the low level employees. They're expendable, like Sarita said. But it is to protect assets. It's to protect their own finances, and because they do have enough money, they have the ability to hire lawyers to enforce it if they want to. Generally, it never gets that far because they tend to intimidate the lower level employees. We've had many employees come to us and say, I quit, but now they're saying they fired me and they won't give me a good reference. We had that happen with a clinic actually down here in Virginia, near Richmond. Anyone who quit, they blacklisted and then said they fired them and reported them as being fired. So when they tried to get a new job and they would call to verify employment, instead of just like verifying employment, or instead of giving a good reference or even a neutral reference, which is what you're supposed to do,